Hello, I'm on my way to Porsche Brooklands. I know how much I'm going to have to pay, and I guess it's more than I thought, but let me kind of talk you through this. I probably won't go into all the costs in detail because my brother-in-law is probably watching this and he'll think I'm an idiot, but essentially the work had to be done. I'm glad that they called me up, they went through the pricing and all that kind of stuff. So let's just quickly recap. My car went in for the major service, that was fine. I also knew that it was going to most likely get the brake discs and pads front and rear, and that was coming in at a fair whack, close to £3,000, and that's kind of what I was ready for. Two unexpected things happened. So number one, I had a heat shield that was protecting the coil packs that had rusted away and was no longer kind of offering the protection it should. Basically it was going to come away. They kind of said, it's hard to say because it's rust related, but it was going to come loose like some point this year. So I called them up, I said, yep, go ahead and do that. They ordered the part in and that was fitted. It turned up today and they fitted the part today. Now, as part of the major service, they're changing the V-belt or the drive belt, whatever you want to call it. There was another unexpected problem changing the drive belt. The belt tensioner had seized. I don't know a lot about this issue. I'll do a bit of research later, but essentially the belt tensioner is there obviously to make sure that there's no squeaking. If it's a bit loose, the belt can rub and cause heat, and obviously, you know, that's not great either. That's the belt that drives the air conditioning, the water pump, and one more thing, I can't remember what that is now. Oh, and the alternator. So yeah, that was the additional expense to replace the belt tensioner. So that was yet more expense on top. So that's obviously parts and a bit of labour. But I guess this is why you take it to a specialist like Porsche, is that they do all their checks and they basically call you up and they go, these things need doing, these things you can maybe get away with. In my case, the drive belt would not even come off. Or maybe, you know, you can't put it back on safely unless you sort the belt tensioner out. So they've checked over the car. I guess when the car comes back to me, it's probably going to be the most looked after and spoiled 987 Gen 2 Sport in the UK, with a full Porsche history of service stamps and so on. So I hope I can win some award with all the money I've spent on this car. It's the most well-maintained car in the UK, probably. It is what it is. I'm on my way there, as I said. When I get there, I'm not sure if I'll be able to do any filming, and to be fair, I haven't got a lot of time right now, so I'm going to get the footage that Mike has hopefully got for us, build that into this video. That was my major service at Porsche Brooklands. I'm taking donations. I'm kidding. Enjoying life and cars to the max and spending to the max, but I've always said this, I'd rather drive a Cayman that I know is well maintained and is in tip-top condition. I don't want to drive something that's basically, you know, falling apart. So yes, a lot of expense, and you know, some people sort of say to me, why am I throwing all this money after an old car? I should just get a new car. Well, you know, I paid say 26.5 for the car. I've spent a ton of money on the car. Some was essential, some wasn't. So the solid performance exhaust, the extra precise handling, you could argue that wasn't necessary, but that's just how I roll. I have spent a fair money on the car, but less than what a 981 GTS costs on the used market. And at the end of the day, I think I've pretty much figured out this car is a keeper for me, given how much I've spent. Enjoying life and cars to the max. I'm going to hand over to Mike, and I'll bring you some more later when the weather's improved and I can take the car out and you know, show you all the work that's been done and go through some of the invoicing stuff. So over to you, Mike.
Hello, this is Michael at Porsche Brooklands. Max has left his Porsche Cayman with us in today for a major service and brakes all-round replacement. He's asked me to give you a quick video of the work. So we started off with the work and carried out the inspection on the car. As to be expected, the car is in extremely good condition. I found the modified anti-roll bars, non-Porsche, that he's had fitted. Overall, the car is in really good condition, like I said earlier. The oil is currently draining with the filter removed, which is in here now. The only one fault found with the car so far is that it did have a small screw in the tyre here. Now I've removed it and checked it and we found it's not leaking, luckily, so that'll be all okay. So I'll be giving you a couple of videos regarding the rest of the work that we do on the vehicle today. Okay, so we've now replaced the engine oil filter, sump plug and washer, just lowering the car down, doing the tyre pressures on the way down before we start refilling with fresh oil, and I've just come across an unexpected problem. So Max has fitted these very nice metal dust caps to his wheels. Now, it's a common problem on these, water gets inside this aluminium and then corrodes them to the valve itself. So I've managed to remove this one. So what we'll do is we'll clean it up and refit it. We'll just put a very small amount of grease on here to help stop these from doing this in the future. But unfortunately, on the passenger side rear wheel, this one here, I'm actually unable to remove it. Now, I've tried removing it with a spanner and grips and it still won't come undone. So potentially if I go any more, it could damage the whole entire valve itself and require replacing. So we'll relay with Max and see what he wants done, and if he would like me to give it a bit more, and if it needs a valve, put a new valve in, we will carry that out for him. So we're at the point now where we've removed all the wheels on the car and we're going to go and attack the spark plugs. So spark plugs are buried right up under here. So our first task to get this done is we're going to remove this part of shielding here and this part here. Okay, so we've removed the two plastic guards, as you can see here. Now it's created a bit more access so we can get to these spark plugs. So next step we're going to do is we're going to remove this upper heat shield cover. Well, I've just noticed that in the corner, I'm not sure if you can see, but the fixing bolt for the lower heat shield cover, which is here, is actually corroded away and isn't actually holding the heat shield on anymore. So I'll be going on a health check, and if Max would like that replaced, we'll do that for him. Top heat shield's been removed, that's here. Now trying to squeeze this out past the exhaust can be quite difficult, so I tend to just leave it here, just to the side, so we can get to everything. So then we've got the 3 ignition coils sitting here in front of us. So we've got to undo the connectors that are buried up here, off the top of the ignition coil. Then we're going to undo the small bolt, there's a Torx bolt, that holds the coils in place. Then we're going to remove the coils, so then we can gain access to the spark plugs. Okay, so we've gone ahead and removed the ignition coils, as you can see here. Also removed the spark plugs now. Got the spark plugs lined up here on my tool trolley. These are the old ones, and these are the new ones. Overall, the old ones are not in terrible condition, but they have started to wear, as you'd expect. The main reason we change spark plugs is because this electrode point on the end here, what will start to happen is the gap between the 4 prongs will actually start to get bigger as it starts to wear away due to the voltage jump in the gap, and then eventually could fail. So this is the original one I've just removed. As you can see, the new one here, electrodes are very much slightly closer to the centre. So I'm going to go ahead and fit these now. So gone ahead, all the new spark plugs are now in and torqued up to 30 Newton meters, is the specification. So I'm going to go and refit all of that I've shown you I've removed now. We're going to carry out exactly the same procedure pretty much on the opposite side of the car, and then that'll be all 6 spark plugs correctly changed, and we're going to move on to the brakes. Okay, so we've now completed the spark plug change on this side of the car. As you can see, it's a very similar setup to the opposite side. So now what we're going to move into is the brakes. We're going to be doing front brake pads and discs on the car today in this visit. So we're going to start with this driver's side rear brake. Now what we're going to start off by doing is we're going to have to remove this pin here that runs through the middle of the caliper. Removing the bolts here, some of the wiring, and loosening the pipework so we can move the brake caliper, this whole piece out of the way. Then we'll be removing the brake disc. Checking inside here, you've got the handbrake shoes inside the disc on these, so we'll be checking them, making sure they're all in good working condition, which I suspect they are. And then we'll be replacing the disc and the pads. We've removed the brake caliper, as you can see here, so remove the fixing pin that holds the pads in between the two. Remove the 2 outer big bolts that actually hold the whole brake caliper assembly to the hub, which is here. Now I've removed the disc, you can see actually inside the handbrake mechanism and the shoes themselves. Now it looks quite grubby in here. It's pretty standard really for a lot of brake dust to build up in this area. There's not really many places it can go. So we'll give that a quick clean up and give the handbrake shoes a little rough up with a bit of sandpaper, and then adjust them back up when we put the new disc on. Now down here on the floor we've got the old and new parts we're going to be fitting. So these are obviously old discs, they're quite ridged. Max also mentioned to me he had a problem with his handbrake sticking every now and then on the inside of the disc. You can see here there's quite a lot of rust build up. Now this does happen because the shoes shouldn't be engaged with the disc whilst the vehicle's moving, so inevitably you will get a rust build up on the inside here. You can see a little bit of rust on the outer edge and general ridges throughout the whole disc. So also these are his old brake pads. Now these are the new ones that we're going to be fitting, so we've got a brand new disc, as you can see here. These are the new brake pads, as you can see here. So if you compare them to the wear on the old ones weren't super worn. we're going to have some nice new ones on. Also, during this brake replacement, we're going to be replacing the retaining clip for the pads, which is here. The brand new fixing pin, which goes through the middle of the brake caliper, holding these pads in place like this. Small new clip goes on the end. Also going to be replacing the pad sensor wiring that plugs into the brake pads. So once I've fitted the disc and adjusted up the handbrake, we'll be refitting the caliper with 2 brand new bolts along with all the other new parts on the floor, and then we'll be moving over to the other side of the car. So we've now got all the new brakes. We've cleaned up the shoes, adjusted the handbrake and fitted the disc. Brake caliper, brand new brake pads with its pin and clip here. We've also replaced these bolts here and fitted the new sensor wiring. It runs around the back here and plugs in over here. So I'm going to carry out the same procedure on the other side, and then we'll move on to the fronts. Okay, so we're now onto the front brake pad and disc replacement on this, on the Max's Cayman. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove the 2 bolts. There's one at the top here, not sure if you can see, one at the bottom. We need to undo a small 10mm that holds the brake line on. We're going to disconnect the wiring for the brake pad wear sensor and remove the caliper completely. Also, we're going to remove the pin and the pads, and then we can take the disc off, and I'll compare the 2 new ones to the old one. So we've removed the brake caliper now, moved the brake disc from here. Now these are the new and old ones. These are all the new parts we're going to be replacing. Similar to the rear, we've got the pins and springs for the brake pads, sensors, obviously new brake disc pads, and these parts here that go in the brake caliper. And these are designed, once you peel off this brown paper, actually stick to the back of the pad here. And this is to help combat brake squeak. So comparing it to his old discs, you can see that on the inner edge they're very ridged and have quite a big rusty outer lip running all the way around here. Also, if we compare the old pads to the new ones, you can see the wear difference. So the wear is on this friction material here. This part here, the shiny bit, is the backing part of the pad. This part here is the friction material that actually stops the car. As you can see, the friction material here is very low compared to this one. So these pads here were probably 70 to 80% worn, judging by how close they were to the sensors. And you can see how the disc had just started to rub onto those sensors and start to cut through. So we're going to go ahead and replace all these bits. Completed the rebuild of the brakes on the driver's side front. Just started to strip down the passenger side, so as you can see here it's all completely stripped. Now I've run into a bit of an unexpected problem, which is pretty standard when working on a Porsche. So if we look here, one of the bolts I mentioned before you have to remove is a small 10mm. This one that goes through this bracket here and supports the brake line from vibration. If this was to keep vibrating, potentially it could snap and fail, meaning you lose brakes on one side of the car. So it's quite critical that this bolt is fitted. Now as you can see, during removal it is snapped. So luckily, because I think it has started to come undone, so first attempt is I'm going to try and get a small chisel in there and try and just knock it round and see if I can undo it out of the aluminium, and we may need to do some thread repair in there. Worst case, we're going to have to drill the complete bolt out and then do a thread repair. So we've had a bit of success with the bolt. I'm just going to run through what we've done to achieve it. So we attempted with the chisel just to try and move it around, but didn't work. So what I've done is I've drilled a little hole through the middle of it, and I'm going to using this easy out. Now this isn't something I tend to use, because if the easy out snaps in the bolt you're trying to remove, these are incredibly hard, and attempting to drill then the easy out of what's stuck in the bolt can sometimes be near on impossible, and you may have to write off whatever you were trying to remove it with. In this case the bolt had actually started to turn, so I thought I'd give it a go. So first of all I used my very small blowtorch here and just give it a little bit of heat around the aluminium, just to try and expand it just that little bit, just to help. I've got the easy out in the bolt, you can see, and then get this in here a bit better. There we go. So got that in the bolt. So as you screw this in, it should wind itself into the hole you've drilled and essentially get to the point where it can grip the bolt. And as you can see, the bolt is just starting to turn. Normally I'd have the blowtorch on this at the same time, but I've got a GoPro in the other hand, so we'll just have to hope it comes. Right, here it comes. bolt. So we'll continue doing this. I think I'm going to have to put a little bit more heat on it just to carry on, and it will be out. So we finally got the bolt out and repaired it. It got a little bit more tricky. So the easy out didn't work, so we ended up having to drill the bolt out completely and repair the thread. So what we've done is, I've drilled the hole out bigger, and then we fitted a thread insert into the hole, ready to receive a new bolt to hold the brake line in place. Now this thread kit we've used is called a time cert, and it's one of these, it looks like this. So it comprises of these small thread inserts, so you buy them for the right size thread and pitch that you need. So this was an M6 by 125. So you get the thread insert parts, you've got the drill to drill the hole out to the right size, a tap to tap the hole bigger than the original so then it can accept the outer part of this thread. And it's got a little tool here. Now this tool is designed just to recess it, because they have a small lip on them, so you can recess it so then you get a nice flush finish. You can get these in all sorts of sizes and they're really handy. So once you've managed to get your old bolt out, then it's easy. The hardest part of doing anything like this is getting the old bolt out, because it's the hardest metal. The aluminium itself is quite easy to drill. So we're going to go and put these brakes all back together now. The end of the work regarding the service and brakes are all done. Next job to do is we're going to replace the drive belt, which is, this is the new one. So it's gain access to the drive belt, involves removing the rear wall carpet. Behind here there's a metal panel, we'll be removing that to gain access to the drive belt, and then we'll be replacing it. So we've moved the rear wall. Now once we removed the carpet, there's a big metal panel here, held on with a number of 10mm bolts. Whip them all out, and off that comes, and as you see we get a very small access hole to be able to get to the drive belt, which is fitted here. Now the tensioner is stated down here. It involves putting a spanner on this, turning it so then it releases tension from the belt. We'll then squeeze the belt out from around all these pulleys and then replace it. Got another little curveball that Max's car's decided to throw into the mix, and what I found when removing it is that his tensioner system, which involves this pulley, damper down the bottom here, and this point here where the spanner is on, is actually seized. This bolt is actually seized inside the tensioner, so I have to use a double spanner setup on this one. So if you look at the nut, you'll see as I move the tensioner, you can see that the nut, or bolt shall I say, is also moving with it. So if I was to retension this belt by just forcing it back into position, the bolt will always be loose. What tends to happen once this has been done is that the bolt will vibrate loose, causing it to fail on the threads. The tensioner will essentially fall off the engine and cause the belt to shred. So we're going to remove this tensioner now and inspect it. So we've removed the old tensioner from the car. This is it here. This is all the new stuff you'd need to replace it properly. So it includes the bracket part, a damper. You've got a new pulley because it's got bearing inside, so it's worth replacing, along with all the new bolts. Now, as regards to the old one, the part that is seized is actually this sleeve where the bolt goes through here. This sleeve should move independently to the rest of the tensioner, and what happens is they seize the outer aluminium, which then means it can't turn. Which then, as the tensioner is working, it will undo the bolt, causing it to fail. So what we're going to do is we're going to build up all these new parts here, build a new tensioner together, and then refit it to the car. Build the new tensioner up, as you can see here. So fitted the damper has to go up a certain way. It's got arrows on it saying pointing upwards. It's pretty straightforward. We've replaced the bolts. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that all the bolts are actually different. So if you are attempting this at home yourself, take the old one apart and make sure you get the same size bolt, the same size shoulders in the right hole, because every single one is different. Also, it's quite easy to over tighten these bolts. People think these have to be really, really tight. They don't. These are only, this one here is only 23 Newton meters, and the same on the back is only 23 Newton meters, which is a very light torque. And the bolts that actually hold it to the car are only 28 Newton meters. So just bear that in mind if you're attempting this at home yourself. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and fit it to the car now. So we've now got the nice new tensioner with its damper all fitted in here, as you can see. So that's all working correctly now. Nice new belt. So now this won't need to have any attention done for it for a long time now. So now we're going to move on to some extra work that Max has asked us to do. involving the exhaust heat shields that I mentioned earlier. We're going to replace those. Okay, so we're just completing the last job on Max's car now. The last thing extra is he wanted to replace the heat shields that I mentioned during the spark plugs that we found were corroded. Now they're off the car. You can see quite clearly the hole is quite big, and this little bolt is no longer going to hold this at all. On the other side it's the same, a little bit worse, got a bit more corrosion around this bottom edge here. Also, as you can see, hole way too big, so it would no longer be held on. So what we've got now on both sides of the car, it's basically the same procedure as before with the spark plugs, but we've taken them off. Now we've got two nice shiny heat shields on both sides of the car. Okay, this will be the last video from me, as this is the last job on the car. I know my video skills aren't quite as good as Max's, but I hope you enjoy. Thank you for watching.